Okay, I've got 5 o'clock and I think everybody's here. So let's go ahead and call this board meeting to order on June 8th. I'd like to welcome you all here today. My name is Sean Eystone. I am joined on this call by Directors Clausen, Eastham, Godwin, Malone, and Williams, and Superintendent Matt Digner and Recording Secretary Kim Colden. Before we get into the agenda, I wanted to take some time. In the 2 weeks since our last board meeting, we saw the death of 2 of our students in tragic accidents. So I'd like to remember them if we could. John Mahindo was a 2nd grader at Longfellow, and Ashley Rensing was a junior at Liberty High School. And our thoughts are with their families. If you wouldn't mind, please join me in a brief moment of silence to remember John and Ashley. Thank you everyone for that. And we can move into our agenda, and I apologize to Brady for having you come in after that. But first up is our update. So Brady Shutt.
Thanks, President Eystone. On behalf of the Iowa City Education Association, I'd like to just start by formally welcoming Eric Howard to the district from the association. We're really excited to have you. We hear great things about your work and are excited to have you as a collaborative partner with us here in the district. So welcome, Eric. I'd also like to thank, on the consent agenda tonight are the negotiated agreements for our unionized employee groups. And on behalf of ICEA, I'd like to give some shout outs and thank yous to folks who were involved. Leslie Finger in the business office does just a fantastic job throughout the negotiating process. His data analysis and his numbers, we don't ever question them. And there's just a level of trust and respect and professional expertise that Leslie and his team have that are fantastic. And so Leslie, thank you for all of the things, instantly responsive to questions that we have. So we really appreciate that. Chase Ramey is, of course, the chief negotiator for the district. And, I'm the chief negotiator for the teachers and the paras. And so we, are sort of in those roles with each other. And I have to say that Chase is a tremendous advocate for public education. He is an outstanding negotiator on behalf of the district, and he looks out for our common good and is just a true pleasure to work with. So Chase, I can't thank you enough for the partnership that we have developed through the negotiating process and beyond. And that was certainly evident this year. And then to the board, I would also say just a huge thank you to all of you on the school board. The level, we've all been through negotiating when it has been tough, and we all have some battle scars from that, I think. And I would say that in the Iowa City schools, that the way that we do it now is unrivaled. There's a level of trust and respect and collaboration and a shared commitment to keeping the Iowa City Community School District as the preeminent school district in the state and in the region. And that certainly shows during the negotiating process, which might be one of the hardest times to see that. You see it tonight in the negotiated agreements for all of the employee groups, because that honors the work of all of the employee groups, and it shows a high level of respect for the value that all of the groups bring to us. So the para educators, nutrition services, secretaries, physical planning custodians, all of those groups. And of course, I represent the teachers and the paraeducators. But I would just say, just on behalf of us and the other groups, moving to 14-step salary schedules is unheard of in the state. People are doing away with salary schedules. So the fact that we are, in fact, implementing them and having them be more uniform across the district is our regional representative couldn't believe it. She smiled at me and said, I can't believe this is happening, that we're doing this. And I just think it shows a tremendous commitment by you, the school board, to all of our employees. And I think that's maybe what I'm most proud of, is the fact that we really do look at this as one district, that all of us do work together. We see the value that all of us, the board, the administrators, all of the different employee groups bring to the district, and that is honored and respected through the negotiated, the collective bargaining process. So just, of course, we urge you to vote yes on these. And it through the consent agenda, and just want to say, you know, thank you to your commitment to the Iowa City Community School District. So thanks. And hopefully, I think my internet connection is a little clunky. Hopefully that made it through.
It sounded great. Thanks, Brady. I appreciate it. All right, we can move into our community comment portion of the meeting. If you would like to make a comment, you need to use the raise hand feature, and I will call on you in the order that I see you on my screen, and Kim will grant you the rights to speak, and you'll accept the rights and unmute, and you will have 4 minutes to speak to the board. So let's go ahead and get started. Kim, first up, we have Dina Bashara.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead,
Perfect.
Dina.
All right. Yes, I'm Dina Bashara. I have 2 kids in the district, a 7th grader at Southeast and a 4th grader at Shimmick. Thank you all so much. I hope it goes without saying how incredibly grateful we are for all of the work that all of you have been engaged in this very long and challenging year. Very appreciative. I'm here to speak with you about 2 issues. Surprise, one of them is seclusion and restraint. The other is the disproportionate discipline of students with disabilities. Regarding seclusion and restraint, we want data transparency. We want goals and benchmarks leading to the significant reduction of seclusion and restraint. And we want an accountability framework. This request is outlined in detail in the Equity Committee's proposed additions to the Iccsd DEI plan. Policies and practices involving seclusion and restraint do not exist in an IDEA bubble and should be subject to scrutiny by members of the community and the board of directors. The seclusion and restraint of children with disabilities is recognized as a civil rights issue by the U.S. Department of Education, who in 2019 established an initiative to address the inappropriate use of restraint and seclusion in the U.S. And just this past week, Senators Chris Murphy from Connecticut and Patty Murray from Washington reintroduced the Keeping All Students Safe Act, which would ban seclusion and restraint. And they had the support of more than 24 organizations, including the National Autism Association, Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint, and the Center for Learner Equity. And lest anyone forget, and you know I won't let you, in the last year we have data for, there was 1,400 incidents of seclusion and restraint in 1 year. So that's about 8 instances a day, every single day of the school year. It is the administration's and the board's collective responsibility to address the civil rights issue. The administration and the board owe students, families, and our community a robust plan to reduce the use of seclusion and restraint. And if the plan is more of the same, we reject it. Turning to exclusionary disciplinary practices in the ICCSD, we have an indisputable fact that the Iowa City Community School District disproportionately disciplines students with disabilities and especially Black students with disabilities. 2019 to 2020, IEP students were 9.8% of total population, but represented 30% of total suspensions. The year before, IEP students were 8.5% of total population, but almost 40%, 38% to be exact, of total suspensions. 2017 to 18, students with IEPs were 8.3% of the total population, but 33% of total suspensions. These numbers were found and calculated from the ICCSD's own annual progress reports. I didn't go any further back because my kids needed me. I have work to do, and sadly, no one is actually paying me to analyze this data, but I hope you get the picture. The point is that the disproportional discipline of students with disabilities is not a new phenomenon. It's been happening for years, and almost certainly in the years prior to the ones I analyzed. And when I say analyzed, I mean I divided the number of suspensions for IEP students by the total number of suspensions. Yet, in spite of this crystal clear record of disproportionalities, to my knowledge, the district has never officially acknowledged or undertaken to address this issue in any comprehensive way. Not only has the disproportionate discipline of special education students not been acknowledged or addressed, it has actually been publicly denied on a number of occasions. How is this possible? Why does it take the ongoing and persistent efforts of moms like me to shine light on these issues? Why has this responsibility fallen on us? And how has no one been curious about this, asked questions, or pushed for a formalized response? We can, although we shouldn't have to, continue to advocate, ask questions, insist on facts, engage in conversation and dialogue. And I'm all about dialogue and building relationships. But ultimately, it is this district's job to first acknowledge that we have a very real problem here, and then to create meaningful and measurable change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dina. I appreciate that. Kim, next up, we have Tammy Neiden.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work that you're doing in this very difficult year. I'd like to thank the teachers and everyone else as well. We do appreciate the work that we're doing. I also want to talk about the school to prison pipeline policies that have been happening for a very long time at the district, particularly seclusion, restraint, and suspension, which have disproportionately targeted BIPOC children as well as students with disabilities. In particular, in our district, we have been targeting Black students with disabilities at very high disproportionate rates. I'm very concerned because even though I've also, like Dina, been bringing up this issue over and over again, I still have yet to see the school deal with the social justice issue as a social justice issue that it is. I'm very concerned at this particular moment because the committee that was put to look at disproportionate discipline was not even looking at disability because they were given incorrect information that there are no disparities. If we had no disparities, we would be outstanding in the country because this is a national problem. On the other hand, this is not just a national problem where we can say, well, we have the same problem everyone else does. Iowa is one of the worst states in the country for racial and disability disparities in this area. And Iowa City Community School District is on the lower end of the state in terms of doing well on these issues. So we have a particular problem here that we do need to address. We didn't create this problem, but we're all responsible for fixing it. It is a community issue, I recognize as well. We're not gonna fix this overnight and we have to work on it as a community. And I am willing to work on this with you as much as I can, but it has to be recognized and addressed. For instance, 93% of seclusion incidents and 94 restraint incidents in our school district were enforced on children in special ed. Among special ed students, Black students are secluded at 7 times the rate as white students and physically restrained at 57 times the rate of white students in our district. Where these identities intersect, the disparities are even more outrageous. Black students with disabilities are secluded in our district at 90 times and restrained at 142 times the rates of white students without disabilities. The intersectional injustice is multiplied, not just additive. It's particularly concerning given the way we have siloed special education and equity work historically. We need to make sure that we're using an equity lens as well as an intersectional lens to examine what's going on in our special education practices as well as throughout the district and our disciplinary practices. So I'm asking you to please support the equity committee's request that we've worked with them on to look at these issues and also make sure that we are collecting data that will show other intersectional injustices if they are occurring on these and other school to prison pipeline practices. The other part of the request is to establish clear and transparent benchmarks that, for getting rid of seclusion and restraint with dates and public accountability for what the district is doing to systematically change policy on these issues. We know this won't be easy and won't happen overnight, but we do expect that this is something that will be done. We don't want to hear a list of pilot programs and things done here and there. This needs to be addressed with systematic policy throughout the district. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tammy. Appreciate it. Kim, next up, we have Heidi Pierce.
Hello, my name is Heidi Pierce. I would like to begin by thanking you, the members of the school board, for your service. I have had conversations about disability rights with many of you, and I appreciate your willingness to engage. You have repeatedly demonstrated empathy, compassion, and a commitment to equity and inclusion. Chapter 103 updates are on the agenda for the meeting this evening. For listeners who are not familiar with Chapter 103, it is the Iowa State Board of Education Rules 281 IAC, Chapter 103, regarding corporal punishment, physical restraint, seclusion, and other physical contact with students. Chapter 103 is intended to reduce harm to students who are restrained and secluded in school. They are the minimum protections offered to students in public schools in the state of Iowa. When school staff put their hands on a child to restrain her or force her into a seclusion room, they are inflicting trauma. Data presented by the Iccsd indicate that children were restrained and secluded 1,400 times during the last year for which data are available. We can do better. Restraint and seclusion are practices associated with the school to prison pipeline. The ACLU describes the school to prison pipeline as a, quote, disturbing national trend wherein children are funneled out of public schools and into the juvenile and criminal justice systems, end quote. Other practices associated with the school to prison pipeline include exclusionary and punitive disciplinary practices such as in-school and out-of-school suspensions. In Iccsd, children with disabilities are disproportionately impacted by punitive and exclusionary discipline. In an effort to reduce disparities, the Iccsd Equity Advisory Committee recently made recommendations for explicitly including students with disabilities in multiple strategies and critical tasks listed in the district's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Plan. Recommendations include the following. Number one, tracking and publicly reporting additional data related to disproportionality and discipline for students with disabilities. Number two, establishing transparent stakeholder accountability and benchmarks in the effort to end seclusion and restraint. This is important to me because I have seen the deplorable conditions in Iowa prisons while coaching a chess club and teaching incarcerated students in a college and prison program at a medium security prison in Coralville, Iowa. Last year, I taught a mental health in prison class, and I learned that many of my incarcerated students were directly impacted by restraint, seclusion, or suspension from public school. These same students disclosed that they had experienced multiple adverse childhood experiences, i.e. trauma, and had developmental disabilities and/or diagnoses of severe mental illness. You have the power to interrupt the school to prison pipeline in the Iccsd. Please review and adopt the recommendations made by the Iccsd Equity Advisory Committee to explicitly include students with disabilities in the district's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Plan. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Heidi. The next one on the list, it says new song host.
Hi, I apologize. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me? Okay. I apologize for the name there. I wasn't able to change it. My name is Jane Stewart, and I am reading a letter tonight on behalf of the Beloved Community Initiative and the Johnson County Interfaith Coalition. At the end of this incredibly challenging school year, we want you to know how much we appreciate and support your ongoing equity efforts in the district. We see all the goals named in the district's comprehensive diversity, equity, and inclusion plan as essential for the good of our whole community. We strongly believe in the importance of continuing to expand curricular and course offerings that help students learn about the ongoing impacts of systemic racism and bias. Resources like the 1619 Project and Black Lives Matter at School curricular resources, alongside social justice strategies and other ethnic studies resources. We are incredibly disappointed in our state legislature for passing HF 802, which seeks to limit those discussions in trainings and classrooms, and many of our members advocated against its passage. Going forward, we want to clearly let you know that we support your commitment to providing effective equity training for teachers, administrators, and staff, and to incorporating a more inclusive and representative curriculum, and that we will do our part to help parents and community members in our congregations understand why discussions of the impacts of systemic racism, bias, and privilege are important to have in all places, including our schools. In solidarity, it's signed by the Reverend Meg Wagner of the Beloved Community Initiative, Usainu Kita from the Iowa City Mosque, Pastor Anthony Smith, New Creations International Church, Pastor Frederick Newell of Kingdom Center Church, Pastor David Borger German of Sanctuary Community Church, Pastor Kimberly Abram Bryant of Bethel AME, the Reverend Susan K. Debner of Zion Lutheran in Iowa City, the Reverend Sarah Getch of Lutheran Campus Ministry at the University of Iowa and Gloria Dei Lutheran Church in Iowa City, as well as the Iowa City Center for Worker Justice, the Reverend Dr. Jan Schnell of Just Church, Iowa City, and myself, the Reverend Jane Stewart of New Song Episcopal Church in Coralville. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ordinarily, we don't answer the questions in the Q&A, but somebody's asking how to make a community comment. So if you use the raise hand feature, we'll get you into the list. So next up, we have Nicholas. Kim.
Hello, good evening, directors. First off, I want to state my unequivocal support for the demands that you've already heard to track and, I think more importantly, publicly report the additional discipline data that has been requested, to establish accountability to those affected by this board's decisions, and also, not more importantly, is equally important, to create clear benchmarks in the effort to completely end the use of seclusion and restraint in the Iowa City Community School District. In particular, the district really needs to remedy the misinformation it has shared already, claiming no disability disparities in discipline practices. And it may seem like that focus on better data is somewhat cold and disconnected, but I want you to understand like the real human cost of these things, how much it actually really hurts people to have personnel within the district treat your own and your child's struggles as either practically non-existent or a quote unquote problem to be dealt with. Now, sure, in the past, the use of isolation rooms, a practice that, by the way, the district promised in 2017 to end, but never has, they grab headlines, but there's also the constant grind of endless meetings with teachers, principals, and counselors who often like to talk down to you about your child's situation in these almost abstract terms, who slow roll real, well-researched solutions and generally treat you like something to be managed. Because that's what these disciplinary practices are fundamentally about. They're about maintaining order, not about what's best for neurodivergent students. And I hasten to remind you as well that this district has been sanctioned twice by the state for its failures to adequately address special education needs. You can't keep finding justifications for doing things the way it's always been done. So an earlier speaker spoke about, you know, like not just pilot programs, not just these little initiatives, not just getting a start. We are beyond the point where like getting a start on it is even going to make a dent. Black students with disabilities in this district are 7 times, you've heard this before, 7 times more likely to be subjected to seclusion or restraint than their white counterparts. I'm not sure how you can look at that and just be like, okay, we need to make minor adjustments, but that's just a statistic. I have a personal example as well. Before having to take my daughter out of the district, she used to go to Lucas because that school couldn't even properly assemble a 504 plan. I would walk her to school every day, which also meant I was the one who usually had to suffer through the grind of those meetings. Now, the crossing guard noticed how upset I was one time, and we got to chatting as we often did. Turns out her daughter went through almost exactly the same thing with pointless education plans and the constant feeling you and your child are being managed. We broke down crying right there on the side of the road because someone finally had recognized the reality we knew to be true, but everyone in administration was actively denying. That is the human cost, that feeling of abject helplessness. It's not just statistics. So given the district's failures to treat disabled students with equity and just honestly basic human decency, it is now a moral obligation, not just a legal one, for you to support the work of the Equity Committee and implement their recommendations. Thank you for listening to me.
All right. Thank you, Nicholas. Next up, Kim, we have Jenny Struthers.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Hi, this is on a different topic than what everyone else has been before me has been talking about. I'm just hoping that tonight you will be able to shed some information on the plans for the elementary school year for next year. I know that the last option to go online is coming up next Monday is the deadline. And I understand that most students in junior high and high school will have had the opportunity to be vaccinated by the time the school starts, but pretty much nobody, unless there's a change over the summer in elementary, will be vaccinated. So I guess I just was hoping you could address what you plan to do. I know that you can no longer require masks, but I'm hoping you'll still strongly encourage them. I'm hoping you'll kind of still continue to keep kids in cohorts, and if you're still going to quarantine and trace and have kids eat in the lunchroom, if some of that can be addressed tonight, just so we will know the plans of what's happening in the elementary schools next fall, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jenny. Next up, Gail B.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go
I
ahead.
apologize. Hi, thank you. My name is Gail Brashears-Krug, and I'm here to voice my strong support for adopting the district's equity committee recommendations. I am a mom. I have 6 kids. 3 of them have graduated from the Iowa City schools and 3 are still students. Several of my children have disabilities, and over the last decade or so, we've had at least a half dozen 504 plans and IEPs and so on. And let me just start by saying that I have had a terrific experience with the school district handling my kids' disabilities. To a person, every teacher, every administrator, student family liaison, special ed teacher, para, etc. They have all been committed to giving my kids the best possible education and really seeing them as people and meeting them where they are with their strengths and their deficits. And I am incredibly grateful for that. But my experience is not universal. My kids and I are white and middle class and native speakers of English. I'm a lawyer, their dad is a psychiatrist, so we are able to advocate for them. We have good insurance and good doctors and good therapists and all of that. In short, because of the race and class privilege that we are automatically afforded, and because we are professionals who can speak the language, the school district views my kids as valuable human beings who need help overcoming their disabilities, which is great. But that's unfortunately not true of every disabled child in the Iccsd. As you have no doubt heard from all of the previous speakers, disabled kids of color, and especially Black disabled kids or Black kids who are in special ed, do not get the same kind of benefit of the doubt that my kids get. Their humanity is not presumed the way my kids' humanity is. Instead, they're viewed as dangerous or troublesome or aggressive, recalcitrant, so on. And, as all the other commentators have pointed out, Black kids with disabilities or Black kids who are in special education experience discipline, suspension, threats, and even police, while white kids get the kind of attention and compassion that my kids receive. And just in short, that is what racism looks like in schools. That's what it looks like right here in our schools. It's unacceptable. Every disabled student deserves to be treated with the same kind of compassion and humanity that my kids receive. And it is your job as the board to make sure that you gather data about that problem and solve that problem. And I will just end by noting, as probably others have, that it's impossible to miss the parallels between the over-disciplining of Black disabled kids and the violent over-policing of Black adults. And if we want to know why police keep murdering Black people, then we need to look no further than the fact that schools keep over-disciplining Black children. It starts here, and board, it is your obligation to stop it here. The Equity Committee has given you some very specific, concrete, implementable steps that you can take to stop harming Black disabled students now. This should be a very easy decision. So please do the right thing for our most vulnerable students. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Gail. Next up, we have Paul Ressler. Kim.
All right, good evening, board, and everyone else that's attending the board meeting. Kim, for the record, my name is Paul Ressler, and I just wanted to touch quickly on 3 topics. The first being the board policies. I'm excited to see that they're on the board agenda today. 2017 for Ruthina and Sean seems like a long time ago, but that's when the 3 of us started working on these as board members of the Policy and Governance Committee. We had a lot of meetings with a lot of people on this screen and some others that aren't here, including former Superintendent Murley. And his goal was that we were going to get these done in a year. So our year turned into 4+ years. But I'm glad that all the work that the 2 of you and the new Policy and Governance Committee and a lot of the faces I see on the screen today completed that work, and you guys are close to adopting those policies. The board as a whole, policy is kind of a word that gets thrown around a lot, but that really is what the school board does, creates policies and implements it, and then lets the administration and staff do the real work in the district. Second thing I wanted to say is it's good to see Dwayne on here. I know retirement's coming up on you here soon, but I just wanted to take a quick moment just to tell you how much I appreciate all the work you put into this district. You and your team has really transformed the look of this district, helped it grow, and some of the projects that you're finishing up right now are super exciting, and I look forward to seeing those completed. Also, the fence at City High on First Avenue looks great, by the way. Very good upgrade. Finally, I just want to take a moment to thank the students and staff, the parents, tech department, the board, the admin, and especially the nurses this year for an amazing school year and work that you guys all have done as a transition in my career from retail, school board to into the classroom. It's been a different view on my end, and I really appreciate everything that you guys have done to make this school year possible and the best it could be for the kids there. As I've said, I transitioned into the teaching role, substitute teaching this year, and of my roughly 200 kids that I got to interact with every day, I know that they had a great experience at school this year. And the ones online that I interacted with too seem to be doing just fine. So thank you for everything you guys did to keep everyone safe and continuing education in this district. So I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you on those 3 things: for completing the policies, for having a great school year, and thanks to Dwayne and his team for transforming the district over the years. And my last note that I'll make is that on the agenda today, you're going to look at Superintendent Directive 3J6 that you may want to start renaming Board Policy 606.1. So for those of you who have dove into the policy, that's the new name for that one. So enjoy the rest of your meeting, and thanks again.
All right, thanks, Paul. We did get another hand go up. Next up is Taylor Cohn.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, I'm a member of the community in Iowa City, and I'd just like to add my full support to the Equity Committee's recommendations and urge you to take the comments tonight to heart. Once again, the requests being made are for the district to track and publicly report additional data related to discipline and to establish transparent stakeholder accountability and benchmarks in the effort to end seclusion and restraint. And also for transparency, accountability, and remedy for data misinformation the district has shared, indicating that there are no disability disparities in discipline practices. There must be more acknowledgement and more accountability, especially when it comes to the intersection of race and disability for your students. The community needs for you to operate with transparency and with real action. I don't know what else to say except that hearing about how prevalent an issue this is in the school district and the city I live in has been devastating to hear about, and I can only imagine what it's like to experience as a child or a parent, and I hope you listen to these parents tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. Appreciate it. All right, we've got a couple more hands coming up. So next up, we have Mary Murphy.
Is the clock going to start running, or
Go
my
ahead
name
and start.
My name is Mary Murphy. My theme tonight is transparency and accountability and protection of children's privacy. First, I want to say I support Ms. Bashara's and others' comments tonight. Their comments are supported by the previous U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights Compliance Review in 2010, the profoundly disturbing and heartbreaking 2017 special education audit by the Iowa Department of Accreditation, and other documents and data and articles that have been produced over time. Second, I was surprised to read the 2021 Conditions for Learning survey administered to students included questions like, how often have you verbally threatened to physically harm someone, beaten up, or fought someone because they made you angry, etc. If Iccsd is asking students these types of questions without a parent present, Iccsd should be more transparent to families and include these questions in the email sent to parents, not just a link to the survey. Third, and the reason I came tonight, is I strongly object to the Panorama contract under which the district will collect personally identifiable social emotional learning data, really mental health information on children, and share it with the EdTech business Panorama, a company connected with Harvard and funded in part by Zuckerberg and Chan and Ashton Kutcher. My reasons include school districts can engage in social emotional learning without engaging in immense mental health data collection on children, and children need human employees to connect with more than entering information on a Chromebook or having teachers report possibly inaccurate information on a Chromebook. Children need caring adults. The Wall Street Journal article, "Have you seen Junior's psych profile?" asked, aren't we really creating psychological profiles that in other settings would be deemed confidential? If so, what is the privacy cost to students who are not at risk for psychological imbalance, yet whose mental health information is being documented by teachers and tracked over time? It's a valid question. You should answer it. Turning children into unpaid research subjects without parents' permission is inherently unethical, and Iccsd should have a clear policy permitting families to opt out. If you don't, I'll be instructing my child to respond in a manner that presents them in the most favorable light, making your data collection less valuable. Children and families should not be required to give up personal data to this extent as a condition of receiving a public education, particularly not to a business that is outside and out of state. My children's perception should not end up in the hands of Panorama or Harvard-educated researchers, and certainly should not be used to improve a product that is sold over time. A focus on SEL, social emotional learning, and data collection of this sort permits schools and administrators to not focus on whether it's actually curricular choices that are driving academic outcomes. I believe in social emotional learning, but I don't believe in this invasion of ed tech into social emotional learning. It's become an educational overdone fad. An Iccsd administrator told me they were protecting student privacy with standard contractual language. He has never produced it. There is no reason to grant Panorama permission to use my child and other children's personally identifiable information in perpetuity, which is what that contract you have before you tonight allows. At the minimum, it should be destroyed following graduation. I have confidence you'll approve it, even though you shouldn't, because you're a policy governed board. You should really not be a completely policy governed board, because you do have a fiduciary duty to ask questions about some of the things that come before you. As a last request, please put the Protection of Pupil Rights Act language on your website. Your screen is blank. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Next up, Laura Crossett.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay. I cannot imagine a worse position than being involved in any aspect of public education in the state of Iowa in the 2020-21 school year or a more thankless job. So thank you to everyone, school board down to custodial staff and everybody in between for the work that you have done. I myself am a graduate of the Iowa City school system, and my son is a third grader at Mark Twain. Wonderful experience there, and I'd like to thank all the staff there for their work. And yet, violent, aggressive, destructive, verbally abusive, without remorse. All of these are terms that were applied to my child in disciplinary reports, from minor classroom infractions to seclusion and restraint reports by age 7. When I've read these reports, I've often wondered what they might sound like if my son, who is a special education student, were also Black. And my conclusion was that I would be showing up at IEP meetings, not only with my child's therapist, but also with a civil rights lawyer. The Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act notes that, quote, greater efforts are needed to prevent the intensification of problems connected with mislabeling and high dropout rates among minority children with disabilities, and goes on to say that, quote, African American children are identified as having intellectual disabilities and emotional disturbance at rates greater than their white counterparts, and that this is particularly true in schools where the teachers and administrators are largely white and the students are largely of color. The mislabeling idea discusses likely refers to specific diagnoses, the ones characterized by emotional disturbances. I believe, however, that the legislation also implies that the labeling of children as violent, aggressive, unsafe, or without remorse is a violation of its spirit. IDEA is meant to guarantee every student a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment, but no child who's being routinely restrained and secluded is receiving such a thing. They're receiving a separate education, if they are receiving an education at all. Such treatment of a child of color violates not only IDEA, but also Brown versus the Board of Education. Brown states that today, education is perhaps the most important function of state and local governments. Compulsory school attendance laws and the great expenditures for education both demonstrate our recognition of the importance of education to our democratic society. Such an opportunity, where the state has undertaken to provide it, is a right which must be made available to all on equal terms. Many, many years before that, John Dewey wrote that what the best and wisest parent wants for his own child, that must the community want for all of its children. Any other ideal for our schools is narrow and unlovely. Acted upon, it destroys our democracy. I know that you all want the best for our children, and I know that you have a hard job, but I believe that these are issues we need to address. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. That was our last raised hand of the night. So let's go ahead and move on into our agenda approval. I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve tonight's agenda.
Second.
All right, Kim, ready to vote?
Give me just a second here.
Yep.
Who was the second on that? I'm sorry.
I believe I did, Charlie.
That's what I thought. Thank you. Online voting is open.
There it is.
All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thank you, Kim. Next up is our consent agenda. Does anybody have questions on the bills? I know there were some kind of asked ahead of time and were answered. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to those or bring up any others.
No, I appreciate the feedback. I just, I asked a couple questions around use of MacBook in the district, and I appreciated the follow-up on that, as well as reminding me of the agreement we made in February around the COVID workshop, not workshops, the COVID clinics that we had. I was just surprised at the ultimate expense of what transpired there, but I appreciate the feedback and didn't have any other questions reviewing the bills.
And I also reviewed the bills. I didn't have, I was gonna to say, I know that we are making some teachers very happy, giving them the options to have MacBooks. One may live with me, so thank you for making that happen.
All right. Are there any items that directors would like to pull?
Yes, can we pull items 8 through 12?
And I'd like to pull item 7, Sean.
Those were what I was gonna say.
All right. So 7 through 12 we're pulling. Do I have it right? All right. I would entertain a motion of consent minus items 7 through 12.
I move to approve consent agenda minus items 7 through 12.
Second.
All right. Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right. Thanks, Kim. The first one, item 7, is the panorama.
Yep, I had a question following the speaker's comments around PII just a moment ago. I would like to get a sense of, from a district perspective, how we're planning to go about getting parental consent for the use of the data collected in Panorama. Because the agreement clearly states that Panorama is not collecting parental consent. I'm just curious how the district intends to get that.
Janet, I'm going to take it, then I'm going to actually turn it over to Lisa or to Laura and Adam to add a few things here. But just for a big picture so that the entire group knows, Panorama is the MTSS system that the Department of Ed utilizes to house certain sets of data. So our fast reading data is collected through that, as well as it pulls our attendance data as well as ODR data. So Panorama is a product that we've been using the last couple of years through the Department of Ed. I'll have Laura speak to the contract a little bit and then Adam to the confidentiality aspect.
Do you have specific questions about the contract, Janet?
I was just curious if, as a district, we collect parental consent.
We send out what we did this year with the screener that we've used, which is MySabers. So that's a different company. That one's through FastBridge. But we have communicated through our school newsletters that the screener will be implemented. And then parents have the choice to opt out of their students participating in that screener. If there's anything that we need to do to strengthen that messaging, we certainly could do that next year. When we implement, screeners for the following school year. But that's been our practice this year. We just began implementing a screener for MySabers, a social emotional behavioral health and academic screener in the winter and the spring. And so those were our first couple rounds of collecting that information. And that's how we approached it, was to create language that we asked the school buildings to share with their parent population. And then again, to give an opt-out option if they, would prefer their child not participate in taking that screener.
That's helpful. And I just making sure that that's obvious and clear to parents, that they have that choice and they have the information from which to make that decision. I've got a lot of experience with opt-in, opt-out from a data privacy standpoint. And I think it's really important that it's very, very clear to parents when they're making those choices. So thanks for that, Laura. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I can speak a little bit to the data privacy components. Panorama is obligated to follow FERPA, as with any other organization we work with who has access to students' PII. And in their contract, the one that's in front of you on page 5, they have a link to their privacy policy that's available there. There's also the data security and privacy section 2.5, which among other things specifies that they'll implement industry standard security to protect both physically and electronically the data that they're collecting, that we are bound, as are they, to collect data within the system that's only required for the educational use of the product. So they're not allowed to use any data that's collected for marketing or that sort of thing. And then if at the termination of the agreement, the district requests that the district owns the data, that's important to note, again, per FERPA. And so at the end of the contract, we can request that all PII that's in Panorama's possession be destroyed. Again, it's specified there that that would be done per industry standards. There is within Panorama's privacy policy a stipulation that they can use information as part of research and development of the product. That's pretty common. And one can disagree about whether that's good or not, but that's pretty common in agreements like this. They're not allowed to use that for marketing. They're not allowed to use that they're not allowed to share that information. And anything that they would make available, like in a published report, has to be anonymized.
Thank you. That's helpful. Again, for me, the biggest issue was parental consent, and that's a clear option for parents. And so with that information, Laura and Adam, I'm happy to move that we approve item 7.
I did have one question on that. Would it be possible for us to request that they do sunset that data on graduation?
JP, we have a motion. Can I get a second?
Sorry.
And then I'll have you ask your question.
Second.
All right, go ahead, JP.
Yeah, so I mean, could we, since they say we can ask them to destroy all of the data, could we put in a stipulation that they would scrub that on when a student graduates?
I can speak from my perspective, the tech perspective. We can request that data be destroyed at any time for any student or group of students. So we have the ability to request that because, again, it's our data. I'd have to defer to the departments that are making use of the product in terms of whether that data would be destroyed upon a student's graduation from our school district, or whether there's legitimate need on our end to have some of that data still in the system for a former student. So I would defer to others on that.
Yeah, with our current purpose and use, we wouldn't have a purpose to have access to that data after graduation. It's just to be able to make instructional support decisions for students while they're in our system.
So what would it take to make that kind of an automatic?
In general,
Adam, we can check into that and come back to you. I think that's probably a good conversation for us to have, JP. And it probably also goes outside of just this conversation for other data that we may be collecting, and then what's useful for after graduation and what's not. And so I think from a larger perspective, we probably just need to answer that question on several levels and then come back. So with this one, it seems like pretty quick conversation here says we wouldn't have a need for it for after graduation, but that might be different. Obviously with like academic data, transcripts, things like that, those are going to be different conversations. So I think we need to put that lens on it and look across the board and then come back with an answer around that.
All right. Any further conversation? All right, we have a motion and a second. So Kim, I think we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with directors Godwin, Malone, Eystone, Eastham, and Williams voting yay, and Director Clausen voting nay.
Thank you, Kim. All right, next up, I don't know, Ruthina, did you want to take them all together or one at a time? It's all the
I
negotiating.
mean, we can take them all together, but if we could do a vote with 7 and then the rest, because 7, I will abstain. It's not that I don't agree with it. I will, 100%. It's just, I'm married to a teacher, and so I typically abstain from that vote on this piece, but I 100% support all of the agreements. I just wanted to add comment to thank ICEA as well as SEIU. I participated in some of those negotiations, and I just wanted to thank those parties for coming to the table, being open and willing to listen and have a very good dialogue, as Brady mentioned, and recognize that we as a district do see all of the hard work that each one of you represented by these contracts do. And we know that we couldn't exist without great people like you all in each one of these organizations. So I humbly thank you all for, especially after this year, working so hard to make sure that you try and meet the needs of all of our students. So thank you.
Well said. On that note, if we want, let's go ahead and entertain a motion for item number 8 on its own. That, yes, that's the teacher one. Can I get a motion?
Move to approve item 8.
Second.
All right, Kim, ready to vote on that one?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with directors Godwin, Clausen, Eystone, Eastham, Williams, and Etsy voting yay, and Director Malone abstaining.
All right, thanks. And then I think we could probably entertain a motion for items 9 through 12 together, unless someone has an issue with that.
I move that we vote for items 9 through 12 together.
Second.
I would like to make a quick comment, if that's okay.
Sure.
This one, I obviously a lot of folks know how near and dear to my heart this is, having been on the other side of the table, doing that negotiating, and now I'm having the advantage to represent the school district in those negotiations. And so these are things that I've been pushing for a very long time. And like Brady said, I appreciate the way we go about it in this district. I hope it serves as a model for other school districts and other organizations for, how a union and an organization can work together for the betterment of all. By doing this, by putting, this is a big step. So I am taking a little time with this, because to move our paras and our secretaries and our other folks to 14 steps is a monumental move. I don't think it could be overstated that we're really trying to even out that playing field and recognize everybody for their work. And the people who benefit the most are the kids, because we're going to reward these employees. They're going to want to stay around. We're going to respect and we're going to pay for expertise by the years people have been in this district. And so it's just a monumental thing. And I thank admin for working with us on this. This isn't something that we had to fight for. This isn't something we had to cajole people into. This is a truly collaborative effort. And I'm just proud to be a part of it. And thank you all so much for being a part of it with me.
Thanks, JP. And just for clarity on the record, you motion that we vote for these. I am going to ask you if you meant to approve them.
I meant to approve them. Yeah, sorry, Sean.
I just wanted to have that on the record. Any further discussion? All right, Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thanks. That moves us down to our public hearings section. We have a couple public hearings. First up is a public hearing on the underground easement for Penn Elementary. Director Malone.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the district's proposed conveyance of an underground easement at Penn Elementary with legal descriptions provided in the attached documentation. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on May 24th, 2021. Attached notice of public hearing and easement as PDFs. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public? If so, please use raise your hand feature.
All right, no hands. We'll close that public hearing and move on to the next one on the Garner Elementary Phase 2.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications for the Garner Elementary Phase 2 wall panel project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on May 25th, 2021. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on May 26, 2021. The district will receive bids on this project at 2:30 p.m. June 10th, 2021 at the physical plant office located at 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa 52246. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on May 26, 2021. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public? If so, please use the raise your hand feature.
All right, I see no hands raised, so we'll close that public hearing. Thank you, Director Malone. We can move down into board policies. I know there was a couple things to note. I don't know if Matt, you wanted to do this or?
Yeah, I think my understanding is this is kind of like a first reading in a way, or maybe not a first reading since we've spent so long with these, as former Director Rossler pointed out here. But a couple edits that we had made coming out of the last P&G meeting would be to draw your attention to would be policy 101, policy 600, 600.G1. Those are the three I would just ask you to probably write down and to continue to look at. I made some linkages to make sure that equity language was cemented into those different policy items. And so one of them is the 600.G1, if I work backwards here, is going to look familiar as the former academic ends policies. And so we did put the diversity, equity, and inclusion plan goals in there. We also adjusted social studies to be more reflective of what we can actually measure. While it's not a perfect measurement when we're considering grades, that's not a data point we can get from standardized assessments as the way the policy was written. And we did adjust some character language in there as well. So an inclusion on equity, adjustment to character, adjustment to social studies in that policy. And then in 101 and 600, it's more like education philosophy. And so you'll be able to see my different lines that we edited to link to our equity goals and beliefs and values around equity there. So I would encourage you to look at those. If there's any adjustments or things like that we want to entertain, I'd be happy to look at that again or take any of that feedback. The only other policy note I have for you this evening is 502.1, the dress code. When we are to the approval time for these policies, we'll probably ask you to wait on that one because we will not be done with our work around the dress code. Our equity committee currently has that and is our equity team or department has that and is working actively with different stakeholders on making sure that policy is reflective of, again, some of our values and beliefs and direction we'd like to go as a district. So that one just may be the one lone holdout that we don't have ready to go when we're ready to do approval of these at the next meeting.
Yeah, so the intent is to, adopt them in total at our next regular board meeting. So I would guess now's the time to offer up any last second thoughts or changes that need to be made. So I will open it up.
President Icestone, do you want to talk about how we would deal with updating those annually?
Yep.
Just as a reminder.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I could have done that too, Sean. My fault.
That's all right. So we nicely have 9 months in a school year and 9 sets of policies. So it lines up well to do one series a month at our P&G meetings, so we can stay fresh on them. So starting in September, the plan is to do the 100s, and October and the 200s. Obviously, if things come up, as the laws change at the state level and we need to update other things, right, we'll do that in a timely manner. But that keeps us on top of keeping the policies relevant and current. So they will never be sitting too long without at least having some eyes on them.
Thanks, Sean. I just, that review and refresh makes sense to me. Every year, though, feels like a lot. I'm just going to put that out there for consideration. It sounds like the process has already been defined, but maybe it's worth considering rotating on a 2-year basis, but it sounds like that's already been decided. But, and of course, making changes as something changes that we have to be reactive to. But I wouldn't anticipate that there would be that level of change that we'd need to do it every year, but that's just my 2 cents.
I think the idea is that if you're constantly reviewing it, you're less likely to have to make wholesale changes. So I would think the review process would be fairly quick on a routine basis, and probably would not be too much of a pill to swallow at any given time. That's the hope anyway, but you may be right, it may become cumbersome and we can address that at the time, but ideally we'll stay on top of it.
Well, and we'll hopefully be doing a
It's
lot
done
of
a year.
heavy lift for you guys to bring, any suggested revisions or changes to those meetings ahead of time so that you can consider those. You, of course, like Janet said, reviewing those every month could get cumbersome from making sure if you've read them. But the good read here now, and then if we bring any suggested edits or needed edits to that point for you to consider. So hopefully we'll be carrying some of that editing lift for you guys too.
Any other thoughts on this heading into the next meeting? I share former Director Ressler's excitement of getting these policies adopted. It has been a bit of time coming, but it was a lot of work too. And I appreciate all the work that everybody put into doing it. I'm a firm believer if you're going to do something, you should do it right. So I think this is a good change for us.
Yeah, I really appreciate all the work everybody did on this. And I apologize, I can't find where this is, but I saw the policy on data and earlier when I was looking this over, and I just wonder if it's worth, but just overall taking a look at our data policy and, making sure that we're, protecting that. Again, I don't know that has changed much over the years or if we've kind of gone with the standard thing. In conversations, when we've had conversations about student data, it frequently has come up, to what degree do we protect that privacy information? How long do we hold on to that? And I just wonder if it's worth taking a look at that and making sure we're sort of kind of following some best practice guidelines on data protection.
We can take a peek at that and make sure that we've got some language in there before the next meeting.
Yeah, I made a note of that one. JP, make sure we take another look at that before we get to the next one.
Anything else? All right, let's move on to our presentation section. So our annual asset protection report. Sounds very fancy.
Yeah, Les is going to take this one for us.
Good evening, directors. You have in front of you several documents that highlight the insurance coverages for the district that are required by most of them by law. I would highlight a couple things in our property and casualty coverage. we are in a very hard market condition on a property basis for entities. Iowa has been identified and been subject to numerous tornadoes and severe storms. We were lucky to avoid one in Iowa City last year with the derecho, but we were fully insured on that, and it cost us $1,000 for a deductible for that coverage there. So we do have the appropriate coverage in place, but we are being rated as being part of Tornado Alley. You used to refer that area to Kansas and Oklahoma and maybe Nebraska, and Iowa has now reached into that area. The other area that or other two areas that continue to have great concern in the insurance industry are in the sexual liability and some of the social issues that are affecting our country, and those continue to bring rise to lots of claims, cases, and that type of thing. The sexual liability, we've had the recent reports of several institutions, Big Ten universities that are, very similar to our own one in our own backyard. So it's not something that we're immune to in K-12 education as well. So that continues to be a risk area. And the other one is the cyber liability area. And Adam has been working very closely with our cyber liability carrier to get multi-factor authentication on our accounts for the district. And we in fact are implementing that at the ESC within the next week. This is a requirement by many of the carriers to even have the coverage to put those type of protocols and protections in place. And again, this is a hot button topic. We've had an ag industry here in Iowa affected, and some of the gas shortages or shutdowns that happened because of cyber demands on that industry along the East Coast. So those have really been starting to rise, and most of that they believe has to do with the pandemic conditions where people are working from home in much less secure network environments. And so some of the protocols that may have been in place have been put aside. And so it's much easier for these folks to start the attacks, and they're coming from all over the world. For example, Lloyd's of London is very big in this area. And one of their coverage areas was to review a hack on a company. The hack was intended only to go to that company, but because of their connections around the world, it had transferred completely around the world in 8 seconds, that hack on that one company. So it is of great concern, and it's getting more difficult to obtain the coverage there. And so that will continue to drive up our insurance rates as well. So those are the three primary areas of concern in that. The report also includes the coverages that we provide for all of our employees, which are the health, dental, life, and optional vision and life insurance for all of our staff that they have the opportunity to buy. So that's pretty consistent with the prior year, and really has not any changes to our policies in those areas for our employees, that we've been able to keep flat premiums as well in all of those employee benefit plans for the next year. So very fortunate on that side of the spectrum of our risk management as we protect our greatest asset in the district, and that is our staff. We can't protect our students because they're not our employees. So.
Thanks, Les. Are there any questions, directors?
So Sean, I just wanted to ask maybe Les and or Matt a general question. Do school districts in the state have access to professional advisors on what kind of insurance coverage needed to have adequate risk protection, risk management in place within those districts? Or the districts were relying upon really well-trained professionals like both of you to do that, to make those decisions about what products to get and so forth?
Charlie, we're part of a insurance pool with 17 other districts across the state. There really are two major carriers in the state of Iowa, EMC, and then the pool that we are in. Our pool is administered by Gallagher, who is a national leader in insurance pools in the education field. They have them in Missouri, Illinois, Kansas, just to name a couple nearby states. They work continuously on behalf of the school districts that are members of this pool. For this coverage, they actually reviewed with 87 different companies to try to access coverage for our plan and to provide the maximum coverage for the dollars available for this. And so we are actually using some of the best and brightest in the country. Several of the people who are representing our pool were just recently identified in the Rising Stars and in a risk management journal that came out. So we do have some of the best looking out for our pool and ultimately for our district.
Oh, thanks very much, Les.
Any other questions? All right, thanks, Les. I appreciate the work. Let's go ahead and move on to our discussion items. And first up is planning for the next school year.
Yep. Good evening again, everybody. Just a couple of review things and then to kind of articulate a path forward here. So July 1st, the state plan will open for accounting for how we put together our ESSER dollars and kind of plan for the 21-22 school year. That has to be submitted by August 23rd. I've shared that information with you previously. We are also going to have to update a return to learn plan every 6 months moving forward. The state kind of worked that compromise with the feds that instead of creating a second plan, we've already had a plan here in Iowa. And so I think what they were able to work out was that we would be able to update our plan moving forward, which makes sense because things have transitioned so greatly since the pandemic started. As we've looked at our ESSER plan, you guys have heard me talk about before that we've really centered on seven kind of main components here: the COVID mitigation, technology expenses, at-risk supports, continuity of service, instruction under ESSA, learning loss, of course, is going to be a huge one for us, and then unspent balance support to support the declining enrollment year that we had. So those are our 7 big categories, but really one of the first things we have to do with our plan is to make sure we've had some input around that. And so we'll be launching a survey pretty quickly after the close of the school year to get input from multi-stakeholders throughout the community. You guys as a board, we've gotten a lot of input from our administrative team and from some of our staff, but teachers, parents, students will be doing this survey on a pretty wide scale to help inform what plans make sense for the district to continue to support with those funds and with those dollars. Some of the things that we've already done, just because we had to get moving on staffing if we were going to be well positioned for the year ahead, which I would say the DEs also recognized from the standpoint that we want you to do the best you can with input, knowing that some of these dollars are already in play and that you had to start to staff your buildings. But we are going to staff our elementary buildings at RAM levels 1 through 4 rather than 2 through 5. So to try to address class size on that, and that speaks to that learning loss component, at-risk supports. It kind of prongs a few different ones there, but when we break that down for you, you'll be able to tell the different ones that it does speak to. We're also going to have academic support teachers because we can't have enough classrooms to break down some of those classes into the class sizes we may want. And it may be more effective to use the academic support teachers for those core subject areas at the elementary. We've added additional language, arts, and math staffing to our secondary buildings, as well as addressed large class size concerns at our secondaries. We've purchased intervention materials to prep for the beginning of next year, extended some of those technology subscription services that we had talked about prior with Lexia and Dreambox, either through ESSER dollars, or we've also sought some grants for a couple of those opportunities. And then finally, one that we kicked off this week was that administrator fellowship, trying to speak to the goals of our Grow Your Own program. So those are a few of the things currently in play, but I would guess the part I really wanted to reiterate to folks tonight was that input portion has to happen with our community prior to making too many more formalized plans. And so we really think that that survey window will probably open during our next board meeting or close to it when we get back on June 22nd. So in July, we should have a pretty good indicator of the results from that survey and how it's going to inform our plans moving into the school year that'll begin quickly in August as we wrap up a little late here this school year. One thing that I did want to make sure to mention tonight that I had in my notes too is that that final online learning program enrollment reminder that's in there. I know there's probably questions from parents. We heard it from a community commenter this evening around some of our health and safety mitigation efforts. We know that masks are not something the district can require, but that parents and kids would still have the choice to wear those. I would say if I'm just trying to speak frankly with you and transparently, I think it'll be unlikely that we'll be quarantining students next year. I don't think that's an absolute or a certain yet or an official recommendation to you, but I think as we're looking at the way things are trending, the way the Iowa Department of Public Health has responded, I don't think quarantines are probably going to be a likely scenario when we get to August, but we will have, I'm just trying to give people the best indicator at this point, but we'll have more information to come as we continue to work with health department as we throughout the year. I think it's probably more likely we will still be contact tracing as there will still be some of the virus, and we'll still be letting people know, of course, of positive cases and if they've been exposed. And then other health and safety mitigation efforts will be continuing to communicate throughout the summer to folks. So I know that there's a lot of questions that are potentially hard for us to answer on June 8th. But at the same time, we do need to have informed decisions to be able to create a staffing plan to offer our online program and staff our buildings and not create multiple switches for staff, parents, and kids as we had this year. That's not a repeatable circumstance that anyone wants to live through or have their child live through in this situation. So if I'm being transparent, try to provide you the best information. That's what we know at this point. So as we plan for 21-22, that's what I had to share out with you this evening. President Iccsd on the board, and any questions you guys might have, I or the team will sure try to address them.
Any questions, directors?
I guess to follow up where you left off, Matt, we got some emails asking these questions, and I think they're fair questions, especially from my perspective with 2 kids in elementary school and thinking about all those things. And I also think it's fair to say on June 8th, we don't know what August 23rd is going to look like. I mean, would your advice be to tell parents that they should err on the side of thinking that school is going to look much more normal? It did than it did this year.
I think that's what I'm alluding to with the mask, the
cohorting of
likely scenario where we're quarantining. Cohorts will be hard to maintain. I think they should be planning for a fairly normal school year, whatever that means. I think they're, like I said, we don't want to take any of those things off the table. We know we still have work to do around what health and safety mitigation efforts make sense. We want to obviously continue the spread of the virus or any variants over the summer to see the status we're in August. But the situation we don't want to be in is pretending that we're going to be able to make a shift or a change or things like that last minute as those variables change. And so if I'm giving you the best look at what August is going to look like, it's going to look more like a typical school year than it looked like this year from what we know today.
And then could you remind me what types of transition points are built into the online program? If you commit to it, are you committing to it for the year?
You can select for the trimester or for the year. So it's a trimester commitment at minimum.
Okay, thanks.
Any other directors have questions or comments? Okay, let's go ahead and move on to our next item, which is an operations committee update. A little, preview of the work session tonight, maybe. Go ahead, Lisa.
I was just going to keep it super short. Because get to operations in the work session, but we gathered and we had a really great discussion about possible potential guiding principles. And so the admin team went back and took that discussion and refined it to the 7 that were then emailed out and presented to everyone. And I look forward to our discussion in work session and hearing everyone's thoughts on those.
Anybody have any questions now that they want to cover at the board meeting? I think we're going to have a pretty good discussion later tonight. So, all right. Thank you, Director Williams. Next up, portrait of a graduate update.
Sure, so I'll be taking that one for us too. So we completed our 4th Portrait of a Graduate design team meeting and got to a place where we landed on 6 different competencies and a visual that we've continued to give feedback on since the design team's feedback, admin team's feedback, some board member feedback. We felt it was important through that process to make sure equity or diversity were represented into our graphic. And there was a lot of conversation in that 4th meeting about how to best do that. And so we worked towards trying to create the best solution possible. We learned that the star in our apple has been misplaced for a period of time, for a long time, I think preceding most of us here on the call today. So we got to reposition the gold star on the apple appropriately. And so I'm going to show you the graphic here. But also wanted to tell you guys that the takeaway I gave the team that evening was we'll need to create an internal team to be the vehicle for this conversation continuing moving forward. So and that internal team, I think, will need to continue to communicate with our external stakeholders, with the larger portrait team. I would enjoy an opportunity to engage with that portrait of a graduate design team in person in the fall. If we could pull that off, I think that'd be a neat sign to them as we continue some of that internal work here and kick it off over the summer, then to re-engage that team or whoever would like to be a part of that to kind of see the update and where we're going and what opportunities will be available in the next calendar school year to engage in that work. So with that said, I'm going to show you the visual we have and talk through those 6 competencies. You'll see 6 competencies in the definitions here in front of you. And I need to move my little window so I can scroll down for you guys here. So the 6 competencies we have, you can see are listed around the outside: adaptability, communication, empathy, critical thinking, global citizens, and learners mindset. We've talked about those previously as I've been sharing updates with you throughout these meetings. The symbol for the district, one that's easily recognizable to those of us affiliated with the district in different ways, is our apple. And then who we're really here for and our purpose is our kids. And so they were a great representation for us to show who these competencies are for and the makeup of our student body. And we feel like we got to a decent place around the visual here and in what it represents and some of the direction we'd like to go for all of our kids. And so then if you continue down the page, this will really be the informative part of the work, right? Is how do we accomplish these skills for all of our graduates in the Iowa City Community School District? How does that look potentially at the elementary, the junior high, and the high school level? There was talk about look-fors, about how do we know and how do we measure progress along the way? Are there certain grade levels we would focus on a certain level of these skills? How does it even inform our building plans as we go forward into FMP 2.0? So I think it's a really exciting time for us. We're going to talk more about intersectionality in the next agenda item for a different reason, but I think this opportunity also creates an interesting opportunity for us in intersectionality when we look at our operations and facilities and some of the skills we want our kids to accomplish and how we can best do that, and looking for innovative ways to bring that forward. Of course, we do work in these areas already, but these are what our community has really said are the most critical aspects for our students to leave our system with. And so we need to make sure that in these 6 areas, we're doing everything we can to make sure our students have a robust skill set in those areas. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions on the portrait work and where we're going. Like I said, next steps are to form that internal team, re-engage with the design team again in the fall, and have a roadmap for a path forward.
Throw it out there to directors. If they have any questions or comments?
I'll just make a comment real quick. I think, you know, one thing I'm really excited about, and I think I heard this a lot in the breakout rooms during the process, is people are like, what are we going to do beyond a poster? And people were really interested in how we're going to implement these things and some concrete ideas. So, so that's something I'm really excited about, to see kind of where we take this and where that discussion goes, to make some real, you know, systemic improvements based on kind of the world we live in today.
I know for me, I know as we've kind of looked at if I go back an item, right, when we were talking about FMP stuff, one of the things we have been discussing is that the work here of the portrait of graduate would help guide us in our, you know, next steps on the FMP. So I'm looking at these 6 competencies, and I'm trying to figure out how we can, and we can talk about this later at the work session, align them with our guiding principles, right? So there's some synergy there as we kind of start that work, because I know that we were waiting, right, for this work to be done to then see how we wanted to address facilities. I know there's a lot more to it than just facilities, but if we can figure out a way to kind of align those 2 pieces, I think that would go a long way. My mute button keeps going crazy. Any other directors have comments, questions? I think it was really good work by a lot of people. So, Charlie, go ahead.
Well, yeah, this is the first time I've seen this in a single form here, and my first impression is just overwhelming awe at what this has accomplished. I mean, I really have to commend Janet and other board members who really pushed us doing the portrait of graduate work, and thank them for getting us to this point. In a way, it makes me wish I was starting kindergarten next year too. So there's a lot to be assimilated here. I'm sure the teaching staff, all the teaching staff, no matter what are their actual positions, are looking at this with great interest and hoping that and planning to do some of the things, you know, that JP I think maybe is intimating that you know, what we're going to do in classroom, what we're going to do in buildings. This is going to make a difference in how we're going to do school over the next several years.
Yeah, I'll just echo some of Charlie's comments. Seeing in one place the diagram and the explication of the competencies is really, really great to see. It is really foundational, and it's going to be exciting to see this come to life throughout all different dimensions of the work we do in the district. And so I want to commend the folks on the design team. They clearly did an amazing job, and folks from the district staff who are participating too, getting us to this point. It's gratifying to see this foundational piece of work at this stage. So thanks to everyone.
Sorry, I'm having a hard time not picturing Charlie sitting in a little kindergarten chair.
If you can dream it, you can do it, right? So.
I don't think I could get back out if I did it. The adaptability as a competency, I wonder how much of that was couched in the past year, that adaptability became the theme for all of us, I think, in the last year. And some of us did it a lot better than others. So I think teaching that skill to students will become very valuable for them in the future. Any other questions, comments on this topic, or should we move on? All right, I'm gonna move on. All right, next up, we have chapter 103 updates. Before I send it over to anyone else, I wanted to mention that Director Malone and I had conversations with some of our community commenters earlier, and I want to just kind of put this out to the team, the board and the admin team, that it's very much a feeling of we need to collaboratively work together to get from where we were to a place where we all want to be. And it's, I think it's a very positive mindset that we all need to take, that we have made positive change and we would like to continue to see positive change. And this is, you know, it was mentioned earlier in one of the community comments that, you know, we need to, it's not expected that things will magically happen overnight, but you have to start somewhere. So I think tonight, this is just sort of step one in the process. And then we will move on from there. So I want it to be coming from the right place, that we're all looking for what's best for our students. And I think that's what everyone here has at their heart. So with that, I will turn it over to Matt and the team.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm just going to kick us off and then I'll get it right over to Lisa unless Amy has anything else she'd want to add. But the first thing, you know, that I think maybe it's obvious, maybe it's not obvious, but I think it's intentional in how we state things. I'd want people to know we do genuinely care about this issue. We care a lot about this issue. You can't care about equity and not care about what's happening with students with disabilities. I mean, these things are, there is great intersectionality between these issues. And so as we approach this work, and the people that are heavily involved in this work do care deeply about the outcomes and the experience for our students. And so I wanted to state that on the behalf of our team, that is an intentional part of our work. Everything we do has to have a lens of equity. And I heard a commenter talk about lens for equity and the intersectionality of those two lenses. And I think that's an excellent way to look at it and to state it, that's how we have to approach our work. So I do believe we're moving towards looking at those things consistently as we approach our work in every fashion. Do we have areas we need to improve upon? Of course we do. You know, that's part of the work. That's why we're here. That's why we're talking about it. The one part I might disagree with Sean a little bit, and I'm not trying to pick on you at all, President Icestone, but you know, it's not just step one, right? There's been a lot of steps taken to get us to the point we're at tonight, but step one, as far as how we continue the conversation now about continuing to get better too. And that's the thing, that it has to be a constant work in progress and a constant improvement course that we're on. And so we're not going to give up until we continue to see the improvement that everybody desires and that we all are hoping for our kids. And just wanted to leave you with that this evening, that our mindset as we approach that work is a great level of commitment and concern for the work to achieve the outcomes we'd all like to see for our kids. So with that, I'm going to ask Lisa or Amy if you had anything you want to jump in with. Otherwise, we'll just turn it right over to you guys.
I would just maybe echo a little bit of what Matt shared there. I would say that social emotional behavioral health of our students is, you know, it has become equally as important as the academic side of supporting our students. And so the presentation that you're going to hear tonight is, you know, data around what we see happening this past year with seclusion and restraint. But I'm looking forward to the July 13th board meeting where we can talk about, you know, what we're doing for all of our students, you know, to support them social emotional behaviorally, because it's every aspect of the system that's working towards positive outcomes for students, whether you're talking about a reduction in office referrals, suspensions, seclusion and restraint. It all is woven together, and we've got a lot of players on this team on this call that have their hands in supporting this work. So I'll turn it over to Lisa.
Yeah, sorry. And I'm going to say one more thing because Amy reminded me of something. I didn't frame it very well. So tonight, yes, Lisa will walk through the slides that are uploaded into board docs there, but we do plan to come back with that larger conversation a month from now, talking about that work and then the holistic approach to that and continuing this dialogue. So this isn't just a one-shot deal. And I think you've seen that from us as a team, that when we take on big issues, it's not just a one-shot deal and then we walk away from it. We're going to continue to dialogue and talk about it and come to the table around it. So we'll be excited to continue that in July, like Amy talked about. So with that, Lisa, now you finally get it. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Kim, are you going to project or show on the screen, or do you want me to?
I sure can.
Do you mind? Thank you.
No.
I'll set us up here while you're setting up. I want to thank everyone for keeping this conversation just alive. You know, as long as we're still talking about it, it's still getting a lot of attention. I welcome the conversation altogether. I just, I just want everyone to know that our entire department and our entire district, we just lean into this conversation because we're interested in continuing to figure out more and more solutions for how we can do things better and better for our students, just because, we do care about them so much. So hopefully, we're going to be talking about some improvements tonight, but also we know we're not where we want to be. So we want to continue to talk about this. And I just am so thankful that our community, our board, our administrators, our teachers, everyone is interested in keeping the conversation alive, because that isn't true everywhere. So I really appreciate that. Okay. So, all right. Sorry, I'm having a hard time there. Okay. Okay, I just wanted to start with a review. Yes, as one of the commenters alluded to earlier, I wanted to remind everyone, Chapter 103 was updated, and that was with after quite a while, the old Chapter 103 was in place, and a lot of public input. New Chapter 103 came out. Which has a lot more parameters in it, requirements, that sort of thing. And I'm not going to go over all the new requirements because we've done that already. But I do really want to remind people that there are specific requirements now and that, yes, they are a minimum of what we need to be able to do. But minimums are important because we need to be able to ensure that absolutely every single time this is at least what we're able to do on any given day. So, another person had a question about our spaces. When we had promised to take out our seclusion areas a few years ago, we were talking about the portable and temporary seclusion areas. We did remove all of those portable and temporary seclusion areas in the timeline that we promised. And I know that was confusing for people. And so the seclusion areas that are kind of alluded to in this Chapter 103 are not portable or temporary. They can't be portable or temporary. So that is a really good distinction, because that didn't used to be in the regs. So any seclusion areas that are described here have to be meet the the parameters of what is described in Chapter 103 officially, which is much more prescriptive. That's a good example of one of the changes. So anyhow, they're significant. If you want to go ahead and scroll down, do I have the ability to do? Okay. Also defining physical restraint, redefining it, and also redefining seclusion, and also giving non-examples of what restraint and seclusion actually are. And what does it mean? What isn't restraint or seclusion? Okay, next slide, please. Okay. So it also goes on to define reasonable and necessary. What is reasonable and necessary? That didn't used to have much of a definition in Chapter 103, and has been defined much more thoroughly in these regs. One thing I want to point out, and we will not talk about extensively tonight, but it is something as we move forward through problem solving this, especially at the board level. This is something I'd want to come back to. We talked briefly last time I presented about the impact of the almost simultaneous adoption of Senate File 2360 along with Chapter 103, which is almost in some ways sort of seems to conflict. a lot of people feel that way anyway, that it sort of conflicts with some of the things that seem to have been important in the adoption of new regs behind Chapter 103. Some of the things we're trying to get away from, specifically restraint, seem to be almost required in some places in Senate File 2360. At least some of the things that we used to do as a alternative to restraint are no longer allowed on not as much as they were before. So a room clear, we only under certain conditions are we able to clear a room for a student who is having an event of some sort. So it really substantially limited some of the things that we were able to do as an alternative to physical management of a student. And that's just something that we'd want to come back to before, maybe any policy decisions were made. Okay, next slide, please. But tonight we're going to talk more about the reporting. And reporting isn't something that was required at all before. And the Iowa Department of Education didn't have any, we had reported sometimes at the board level. Some, communities never reported publicly at all. There was no requirement in the regs for reporting, and there certainly wasn't any involvement from the Department of Education. Now, with the new Chapter 103, there is official reporting involved. It's to the Iowa Department of Education, and it's through BEDS, the BEDS survey. BEDS is a place where we house a lot of educational information. It's a formal site where a lot of our information goes in. BEDS does have a technical manual that answers all of the questions around submission of data. The manual, and we have a lot of questions about how, especially since this is our first time around entering this information, and our first time implementing these regulations. We've had a lot of questions about how to report it, how to count it, these different events. We haven't necessarily gotten definitive answers yet. And we have gotten answers that say that will be addressed in the technical manual, which isn't out yet. So, we were asked to report tonight, which is completely fine, but I do want to, put out a disclaimer that when the BEDS manual comes out, we will go back and take a look at, all of our information that we're reporting in BEDS to make sure, okay, so now, we're reporting numbers tonight based on the information that we have and the report that we, the way that we understand it, the way that we're supposed to be reporting it. And if we would get clarification that indicates something else, then we will go back and make our submission, more correct with updated guidance. Also, the school year obviously isn't quite over yet. We had to draw our, counting of the events to a close in order to get the presentation, the numbers ready for the presentation tonight. And so we made that endpoint May 28th, which was a week ago last Friday. So anyway, we are kind of counting on that possibly the Department of Education might publish these numbers someplace. We're thinking probably they will apply their parameters for personally identifiable information, which in the past has always been 10 students or 10 events. So, any number exceeding 10, we are assuming they may report publicly somewhere. We don't know that, but that's what we're going off right now. So when you see those public reports, it is possible that the numbers could be slightly different because of those reasons. Okay. So here are the numbers. as you can see, they are significantly different than the numbers that have been reported in the past. They are different numbers. They're a different number of events that have happened. The new regulations, there are some differences in what technically count, I guess, as a seclusion now. There are slight differences, but those changes went into effect in January. Also, granted, we understand that we didn't have as many in-person school days. So we are looking at this information with that lens. But we're also seeing that this is a very significant decrease. And so we meaning our team right now has been the only people that have had access to this information so far. We are cautiously optimistic about the efforts that we have been employing in this area so far, and believe that we're heading in the right direction. And I'm going to say again and again and again and again, we know that we feel that we have some things underway that are working, and we'll talk a lot more about that on July 13th and exactly what are those efforts, what are those things, and explain a lot more about that. But I'll say a million times over that we're not where we want to be, because our goal is 0. We don't have a goal of 1,000. We don't have a goal of 100. We have a goal of 0. We've never had a goal of anything other than 0, because every single time that we have to put our hands on a student, it means that a student has had an event that they've really been struggling. And we know that we never want students to struggle that much at school. We never want them to experience an event of this magnitude ever. So we want to back that way up, have all the right supports in place for that student way before we get to this point, which we will talk a lot more about in July. We think that we are, a lot of times we're, being more successful in achieving that support, obviously, but we're also obviously not making that goal every single time. So we know we still have work to do. And when I say we, I mean we as a entire Iccsd community, because these students that we're talking about right at the moment are all of our students, and I do think that that is something that we've really made a lot of progress with. That shared ownership of all means all, and for staff and students, it has to. Because if it doesn't, then pretty soon we're going to start a sorting game, and who are we going to sort? Discrimination doesn't discriminate. Pretty soon you're sorting everyone, and I just feel like our staff have been making amazing progress in just this shared mentality. That's one thing that I really want to acknowledge here. And I think that is one explanation, which takes me to the next slide. Let's see.
Hey, Lisa, before you go to the next slide, I have a question on the previous one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand the number of students both secluded and restrained, because we've got 20 students who are secluded, 19 students who are restrained. I would have thought that number would have been 19.
Right. So that is the number of students that had both a seclusion and restraint.
I'm trying to unmute. Yeah, so I agreed, but there's 20 students who had both, but you only have 19 students who are restrained. So I don't understand. That data is not making sense to me. So it's a nit, I think, but
yes,
it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, there could be students who only.
Are they separate, I think is the question.
Yes,
It's not inclusive.
no,
Does that make sense, Janet? So there was 20 here, 19 here, and 20 that had both. Additive, I think.
Yeah, I'm struggling. We don't need to take any more time on it. Thank you though for trying to
Well,
figure it out.
I appreciate, Janet, I was confused. And so at least I guess what I'm wondering is, do we have 20 students total? Is that our global population involved in these incidents? Or do we have 59 students involved in the incidences?
I want to make sure that I understand your question.
So looking at you, we have 20 students who are secluded, 19 students who are restrained, and 20 students who are both secluded and restrained. So are we dealing with a total population of 20 plus 19 plus 20, which is 59? Or of the 20 students who are secluded, are all 20 of those students also restrained? And then of the 19 students, only one of them was not secluded?
Yes.
Except that was an or question, so I don't know what the yes refers to. Is it the latter?
Yes, it's the latter. Yes.
Okay.
So I think just to remind you guys of the scale of this too, because like Lisa said, I think there's a few things that contribute to this, but when we reported to you guys last time, we were seeing those numbers in the well above 1,000, 1,400. And so we know COVID's been a difficult year. I'm not sure that Lisa stated that out loud. Not only a difficult year, but changed our learning model and some of those things. And so there's probably multiple factors that play into this, but there has to be a link to some of the changed mentality that she talks about, or a changed response to those things that we are seeing a decrease in this. Again, the goal is 0. We're going to keep coming back to the table around it. We're going to keep having the conversation around the intersectionality of the equity in the students with disabilities and how that looks. I know there was also questions around disciplinary practices that I think will also, when we come back in July, be able to have some additional conversation around, which would be good. But this is not a slide to move on quickly from, because it is a dramatic decrease and a definite sign in it, I think, in a change in a practice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, did somebody?
Well, the change in numbers from over 1,000 to less than 100 or so, or in the 100 range, to me, that indicates what I would like to see really is for the coming school year, the first trimester report, as the equity committee is recommending, to get a handle, or to get real knowledge about, well, what practices are changed, what the effect of the different classroom structure with COVID, what effect that had.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Charlie. We actually really did note. I think it's important to note that, these, when we see numbers, there's a tendency to think of them as numbers unless you know the people. These aren't numbers, they're people. And these are for everyone involved here. These are our precious students. These are people, these aren't only people, these are people that we care about, really, really care about. And for those people, something changed here. I think probably several things changed here. But one thing is that some demands were reduced for them. And, whether that be because when they were at school part of the time, they were in smaller groups. They weren't at school as much. So what happened for them on off days? Some of these students were at school as much, because remember, we had students with IEPs, many students with IEPs report to school every day. Even, when other students didn't come to school at all. So, maybe that's true and maybe it's not. But I think in the individual cases, That's where we need to get to zero. That these are individuals, really, really unique individuals that, you know, we are a public school. We don't sort our students. We don't, when students come to us, we don't say, I'm sorry, you have to go away. You have to go somewhere else because we just can't. Your needs are just too much for us. Some districts do that. We don't do that. We serve everyone and we make them feel welcome here. And that is something that we're committed to. We welcome our students and we take them exactly as they are. And we find out what makes them tick. We make good relationships with them. We put really good supports in place and we make it better for them. That's what we're trying to do. And the information says that a lot of times we're getting there and not always, not always. So we have more work to do. We're continuing to get every single resource that we can get a hold of. And we are getting more and more resources on board. And we're going to talk about some of those specific things in July, some of the things that are really pretty amazing, actually. You know, we don't send kids anywhere, and I don't want to send them anywhere. They're better off here. They're better off here with our people. I know that our teachers, our paras, our principals, our SFAs, our behavior interventionists, our people know what they're doing and they're committed to doing it. That's not true everywhere. So I wouldn't send them anywhere even if we could. They're our students. They belong to us and they belong here. And we take them as they are. So if you'll advance to the next slide, I cannot leave this Zoom without saying, first of all, our goal is zero. I will be strongly against any goal that isn't zero. It's always zero. And that's at the case level because students come to us in all kinds of condition and we need to get things in place for them and take it down to zero. That is the goal for every kid. And then if you go to the next slide, I just can't leave without saying, just extending my personal gratitude to our staff and all of the progress that we have made. I'll just say I'm just going to attribute it to our wonderful staff who these folks show up in every way for the students that we have. They come and do hard jobs. And it's disheartening, I know, at times when they see that those numbers that we were looking at and those faces that they know, when they see their kids struggling, and having days that are not successful, it kills them. And I want them to hear from me today how grateful I am that they're willing to give so much of themselves for our students. I truly, truly thank you all. I really do. From the bottom of my heart, I genuinely thank you. Because they can be hard jobs. So with that, I'm just going to take any questions that you have.
So I don't have a question, but Director Glenn, I wanted to say thank you for sharing this update and walking us through where we're headed, and especially about your words about shared ownership, because that really struck and spoke to me. Because I think it's important to note that it appears we're on the right steps now. However, speaking as a Black woman who has been marginalized in many situations And after hearing from our community commenters tonight and the group of parents we talked to earlier, I think it's important for those of us in power to acknowledge the missteps and mistakes and harm that has been caused in the past. So I just wanted to take the time to say that I apologize for the pain caused to those who spoke tonight, as well as those who didn't. I honestly do believe that each and every one of the people on your screen here within our district and those who have contact with our students know that we still have a lot of work to do. And I know and I believe with all my being that they're passionate about correcting our issues and really making this district great for all of our students. And I'm really looking forward to continuing this work. So thank you for starting us off. And I hope we can keep moving in the right path.
Yes, thank you. I agree.
Well, I would just say thank you for saying that, Ruthina, because I think that connects to Lisa's idea of the goal is zero, right? Because any of those situations where we end up there, that is a student, right? And the thing I always appreciate about Lisa when she talks about it is starting at the case level, you know, with problem solving these, we need to have district processes and practices, but we have to remember that it's at the case level because it's affecting a student and it's affecting a family when those situations happen. So I think you articulated that very well around you know, past harms that have been caused and what we're doing to try to fix that as a district and the commitment to being better. And like I said at the beginning, you know, you can't talk about equity without talking about these components. And so I think they're all critically linked together and an important, you know, point to make as we consider the work moving forward.
Yeah, Ruthina, I too really appreciate your comment there. And you know, it's and I appreciate the community commenters, you know, frankly, not just for tonight, but we know that these folks and others have been tirelessly, well, maybe not tirelessly, I bet they're really tired, but they've been working and pushing on these things for years and years and years. And you know, the one thing that I really appreciate from you tonight, Lisa, especially is, you know, a district could just toot their horn and say we went from 1,400 to under 100, and we could, you know, a lot of people would accept that, especially people who aren't familiar with these situations, the people who aren't in the trenches, seeing these kids' faces and working with them. It is very easy for the general public to dismiss kids in special ed. And I think that, you know, the one thing that you know, I don't know this, no, I shouldn't say that. I do know this personally because I was in the district when we weren't necessarily working on that culture shift. And the one thing that I think is maybe the most important in this is that we all see all of these kids as all of our kids, because that absolutely wasn't the case. I had many instances where certainly special ed kids were in special ed, particularly kids with behavior struggles. And we, you know, we systemically did not do a very good job of including them. And so then the culture is for a lot of teachers that I don't teach those kinds of kids. That shift, the more we change that shift, I think that's, you know, I hope that's a big reason we're seeing a drop in the numbers. I hope that's a big piece of it. But I know those culture change, you know, that's just not something that happens overnight. But if we can keep the pressure on that, I really think, you know, I guess, and I also appreciate this goal of zero, because that's, and I'm, you know, maybe prior to tonight, when you look at like the recommendations that came through the equity committee, you know, I think what they were trying to do with that, right, is be realistic, right? They're trying to say, hey, we know we won't get there in a day. And so here's a realistic, well, these numbers are far better than anything suggested, which gives me a lot of hope that we are going to move in this direction. And I too am really excited to really continue that work. It's so fundamental. You know, as somebody who has personally worked with, you know, students who might exhibit this level of events that are really unfortunate, I know quite well how much work it takes and how much dedication it takes on so many people's parts, families, the kids themselves, and certainly all the staff that are working with them. And I also have always appreciated this specifically about your leadership, Lisa, is you go to bat and you get the resources in place that we need. And I know it because I vote on those, on the overage that we spend from general fund to special education. And I always bring it up because I think it's mainly important to remind the federal government that they're giving us an unfunded mandate, and that's how much it costs to actually educate these kids. And I'm very proud that as a district, we continue to spend what needs to be spent to get those behavior interventionists in place and to do the things to educate these kids that a lot of districts don't do, that a lot of districts refuse to spend the money that's needed, even though it's required. And so one, I'm hopeful for all that. And two, maybe mostly I appreciate the emphasis from you folks on more work to do. More work to do. We're not done until we're at zero. And then I do like this idea of reviewing, because one thing I think we fail at as a district, generally speaking, is telling our story. And so then people in the community, they have the stories that are out there. And I just want to keep working on this, you know, letting people know that's that transparency piece. Here's where we're at. And so if it's every trimester that we're looking at this, and if it's that we have if it's a part of the equity committee, if there's a subcommittee that kind of helps tabulate this data on an ongoing basis, I think that helps us continue to tell the story and not sort of have one or two big presentations a year. And having said all that, I'm very excited about July's update because I'm, you know, really interested in understanding all of the stuff that's going on before we ever get to these events. And then hopefully understand, because I'll be honest, I'm still thinking 1,400 to this number. I'm having a hard time believing it, right? I'm not saying it's not true, but it's just so dramatic that I just would love to hear more unpacking about sort of how we think, how you all think we were able to get there, and then how we can keep moving in this path to that, to get the, you know, those number of students down and incidents down to zero. So thank you. And yeah, we'll keep pushing.
I'd like to jump in now because JP kind of teed me up here. In the last couple of years, I've really become this proponent of the culture of and, right? And I think we can look at these numbers and say, that looks really good compared to where we were at. And this year was really weird. So we don't know what that means, right? We have to be very careful to see, you know, what does everybody back in classrooms full time, what does that do to our numbers, right? It can be both. We could have done great work and had great successes and still see some slide back the other way because we just don't know what is different about this year. And along with that culture of and, I think we have to be able to say that we do care about all of our students. They are all of our students, and we have the best intent for them. And we still have disproportionality because we all have biases and microaggressions and all of those things that come with it, right? Both of those things can be true. And that's not anyone's fault. That's just the way the system is built, you know, outside of our school district. And then it trickles down into our school district. So we just have to be aware of those things, that we can have absolute best intent and still and are doing great things and making progress and still not see some of the pitfalls that we can fall into. And I don't think that's a bad thing to point out. I think that's just a change of mindset to be aware that, all right, I know I've done great stuff here. Over here, we have failed and we need to improve that. And then, you know, Lisa, you had mentioned that, right? We're not there where we want to be. And I think it's been, some of the points that were mentioned earlier are concerning, where talking about how we were putting out disinformation or things like that, like those are concerning statements, right? I think Ruthina did a great job, you know, taking that group ownership, right? We have not done great throughout the years and have made mistakes, and there is disproportionality in our discipline with both students with IEPs as well as students of color, and then you have the intersectionality there. So I think it's important to own that and be very clear about it, because if we can't own it, then we can't fix it. And I don't want to say we're not doing any work to fix it, because we clearly are. And I thank everyone for all of that work. And what else can we do to keep improving? And I think that's that's the ask of us, right? Is how do we keep taking steps forward and keep making improvements to get to that goal of 0. It's not a lofty goal. It's, you know, a perfectly normal goal to have. So I think we're getting there and have more work to get there. So I appreciate the work that's been done, and I'm willing and eager to spend some more time talking about it at our next meeting, well, 2 meetings from now, I think, and doing some of that work with you, because I'm part of the system as well. And so I can either be part of the problem or I can be part of the solution. So I'd like to figure out how we can all do that.
Well, thank you for that too, President Eystone. I think you said it well there, you know, with we can all care about the problem and we can still have things in our system that don't work. And I think that speaks to our diversity, equity, and inclusion plan, when we know we care about kids, that we want to be connected to kids, but what systems do we have in place that still get in the way of our outcomes changing? And, you know, this is one example, but we have several examples of areas we know we need to improve on in the district. And it's not because people don't care about those individuals or want to be better, but that we have systems in place that you know, we fundamentally need to look at and continue to improve. So I think that, you know, unless there's other additional questions or comments from board members, I know that's the information we had for tonight. And then we're excited for the follow-up conversation and willingness to, again, to look at it with that shared ownership perspective about how we continue to get better and come around the table to work towards that goal.
Anything else, directors? I know it'll be a good, more of a roundtable conversation, I think, at that next meeting, to have a little more dialogue. So I think that that's a good step. Anything left for tonight, though, on this topic? All right. Thank you, Lisa, for that report. I really appreciate it. So let's go ahead and move on. We do have one action item. I don't know if needs any context really, but anybody need to offer any up, Matt or whoever else?
Are you looking
So
for?
I was waiting for Dwayne to jump in there, but I don't really have anything to add. You just have the simple conveyance of property at Penn. If you click there, I was actually trying to get my board locks to load out a presentation, but it's the utility easement with Quest. And so if Dwayne, are you connected there? Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'm sorry to be late. There's some work going on in front of Penn. The city's redoing Cherry Street, so they're redoing the utilities while they're at it. It's a pretty straightforward easement, and I would encourage y'all to approve it.
Any questions or anything by anybody? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I move we approve the underground easement at Penn Elementary.
Second. All right. That was a tie, but I think Charlie might have got in there. Kim, I think we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, so the next item on the agenda is the director liaison report. And I just wanted to talk about the Silver Salute. Was a really nice celebration honoring our retirees and our 25+ year employees. And there was a lot of people on that list. I don't remember what the total numbers of years of service was of that group of people, but it was a lot. But it was really nice to be able to see some folks in person, although, you know, a little bit different than it had been in the past, but that was a really great event. And then the foundation also had its Education is Everybody's Business virtual event, which is very different than it has been in the past, but it was also very nice, and some great speakers on there. Gave some thoughts. I won't call anybody out. That's hiding their head right now. But that was also a really nice event. Any other directors have any things they want to highlight?
I do. I just wanted to take time to really thank Nick Proud for all the hard work he did in working. I know it was other people involved in the district, but the graduations at Extreme Arena was awesome. Even though I know we ran into a little bit of technical difficulties that you have to figure out for city that night, but I really enjoyed, especially being in air, but just how great everything came off. So, you know, a special huge thank to Nick, but I know there's so many more people on the team that helped with that. And the TSC graduation. I don't know if people were able to take a look at that link, but you know, Matt gave some really nice words at all of our graduations, but especially there. And so I really want to say a huge thank you to him as well for, you know, kicking off his first year as super doing those address at graduation. And I noticed that at each one, there was something a little bit different. So I appreciated that.
Thank you, Ruthina. I appreciate it. There's a lot of people who put in efforts to make those graduations special, and we're looking forward to the Tate one on Thursday. So we're excited about that as well.
Yeah, I certainly would echo everything Ruthina said. I just want to point out, even though I didn't get my my liaison activities in here this week, I did get a chance, like a lot of you did, to tour the NEST program over at City High. And I just want to give a huge shout out to them. I mean, I think when we talk about kind of the things that we're doing sort of preemptively to sort of, you know, support kids in school, having a space like the Nest and the way that they do that to support kids who might be, you know, dealing, you know, needing a little mental health break. I just think it's really well designed. I'd be eager to see that other schools could kind of copy that model. I really, you know, as somebody who works in mental health, I just really appreciated their model and specifically works with kids in schools. You know, this is something I can talk to patients about. This is something I can tell other schools about as a way to support their kids. And it's just, I think the need is tremendous. It's probably, you know, certainly more than we wish it were, but then especially this year. So I just can't say enough about those folks over at City High that are putting together a really phenomenal program for folks, you know, kids who just need a little break in their day, you know, maybe a little time to process, maybe a little time just to chill out and collect their thoughts. But it's very powerful and the kind of thing that's gonna, you know, keep kids in school and, you know, hopefully ultimately save some lives, really. And I appreciate that. And so I know a lot of board directors got out to see that, and I appreciated that too, that there was a lot of interest, and those folks were so gracious to stay late in their day, for me anyway, and really spend a lot of time talking about their program.
You know, JP, it was really inspiring visit, and I agree with you there, and I think I put Matt on the spot a little bit in my visit over there with him. When he and I were there together. I think we should try to support this among other schools as much as we can do. And real shout outs to the staff at City High, all the staff that put the program together, supported it, and make it happen.
Anything else, directors? All right, let's go ahead and move on to our agenda setting. So we have our next regular board meeting in 2 weeks on the 22nd, and you'll see the agenda there. You know, our usual stuff with the bills and personnel and open enrollment and whatnot. We do have on there a discussion on draft ballot language, as well as an annual operations report. And of course, the board policies that we discussed tonight. I'll throw it out there to other folks for things they want to add there. I would ask the question, is the next meeting potentially the last meeting of some of our folks that are normally on this call that we need to roast a little? I mean, say goodbye to? because we should probably make sure we acknowledge the great work that some of those folks have done. So maybe Matt and I, we can make sure we get that on there. Is there any other things that directors would like to see added on to the 22nd? Oh, all right. I like it. Silence. I will remind everybody, we do have a work session. I am going to give us a few minutes. So I had 7:24 on my phone, so I was gonna give us 5 minutes. So we'll say 7:30. So we will come back.
It's the same link, right?
What's that?
The same link. Yep.
Yep. So if you just want to stay and shut off your camera to go have a little bio or something like that and come back, turn it on, and I'll know you're here. And if you are leaving, then thanks for everything. But with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you, everyone. See you in a few minutes.